Okay, so we got the final 2 episodes of Fear the Walking Dead. And I gotta say, I really actually enjoyed them. I thought they were really good. One thing that we have always said is that whatever happened with Alicia and her arc would inform Beth's arc. And that was definitely true. The final episode did not disappoint on that count. But there were actually a lot of things that we could point to as foreshadows of Beth's arc. So I will get to all of those. The ending was also kind of fun because it's obvious that even though this show is ending, the showrunners clearly have plans for what's going to come next. So I really liked that. But let's just go ahead and dive in. I'm going to try and do both of these episodes together, but if it gets to be too long, I might split it into 2 parts for each episode. All right, so we start out with Troy's people setting fire to the swamp so that they can release the walkers. Clearly, Troy is using the walkers as an army, which is what they talked about before, and I talked about how that has ties to the CRM. Tracy finds her way back to Troy, her dad, and they have a talk in which she asks why Troy would give her Alicia's necklace, because he hated Alicia, but he gave her the St. Christopher medallion, and he just says that Strand was wrong about it belonging to Alicia, and it's just a different St. Christopher medallion. Then they accidentally trip a tripwire that brings a log down and flips the truck. That was actually kind of a shocking scene. I didn't see that coming, and it was a massive, that truck got air. But, they both live. However, Troy is pinned to the seat with a branch that went through his shoulder, and Tracy's on the outside. And he basically eventually tells her to go get help, which she says she will. And because he can't get out, he's pinned. And there are walkers coming. So she just had this line that I put in my notes that said, "I'll come back for you," which, sounds like a Daryl line to me. Anyway, Madison then goes to the swamp. She's in the MRAP. Remember last episode she left and she was going to go by herself to kill Troy. But she gets to the swamp and realizes that none of the walkers are there anymore and that Troy has already released them. Strand is on the radio trying to get her to tell him where she is so that he can help her, but she refuses. And then Tracy gets into their MRAP and she's hoping to use the radio to call some of Troy's other people to help him. But of course, Madison's not going to let that happen. She leaves Tracy in the MRAP and calls Strand to come get her, basically, and then she goes to kill Troy. Now, when she gets there, he does actually manage to get out then. I don't know, I guess he's just so ticked off at Madison that he finds the ability to finally free himself. And he does try to feed her to the walker of his wife, just like Tracy does. But Madison kills that walker by stabbing it in the head, and he gets really, really upset about that. He tells her that she shouldn't kill him because he can tell her where the herd is going or where they're being taken, and he's the only one who knows how. But first he wants to bury his wife and then talk to Tracy again. She finally agrees, but only because she wants to stop the horde from getting to Padre, right? She has this line, and it's about Alicia, but it still just felt like a Beth thing. She said, "It must be nice getting to bury the person that you love." And again, we believe that, they didn't get to bury Beth. They tried, during the missing 17 days and weren't able to. So that really jumped out at me as a, possible thing that Daryl would say. He then kind of tells her what actually happened with his wife. He says that she was bitten and Alicia came to help because Troy sent out an SOS and she came in to help and cut off his wife's arm. So there was a parallel between Troy's wife and Alicia in that they were both missing an arm because the wife was bitten on the arm, the same as Alicia was. And then his wife, whose name was Serena, started helping people too, just like Alicia did. But one of the times when someone sent out a radio call for help and she responded, it was a really bad dude and he just shot her and killed her. And so Troy was blaming Alicia because he said his wife believed the same, quote unquote crap that Alicia did about helping people, and that's what got her killed. He also said that his wife was shot by this person and left for dead, but he went and found her in a strip mall, holed up in a strip mall, and held her while she died. So again, I'm just seeing parallels there because this woman was shot and left for dead, much like Beth was. In this case, she really did die, but he went back and found her first. The other thing that I have a note here about is that after the accident, Troy has this huge bruise on his forehead, and it's more on the right side than Beth's was. She was shot on the left side of her forehead, but still, it was this massive forehead abrasion, and I just kept going, I don't think that was on accident. They decided to give him a pretty big forehead wound. Plus, he's got the messed up eye, which is serious symbolism. So it just, again, it felt like trying to remind us of something. Let's put it that way. So eventually Troy knocks Madison over the head when a walker comes and runs, but he falls into a trap. And then we have Crane come back. Now, for anyone who didn't watch the first part of the season, the two people that were originally running Padre were a brother and sister. This man was the brother, and the sister was actually killed in the mid-season finale of the season, so before the break. And his name's, they're the ones that gave everyone bird names. So her name, she went by Shrike, and he went by Crane. So this is just this guy coming back around because he's still out there somewhere. Now, it may feel a little bit random if you didn't watch the first part of the season, and, to me, I wasn't happy to see him or not happy to see him. He kind of seems a little irrelevant at this point. But the one thing I want you guys to take away from it is that they had not finished off his arc. He was still out there somewhere. They had to bring him back to close off his character arc. So whether they killed him or left him alive, whether he, turned to the good side and joined the group or remained a villain, it didn't matter. They just had to bring him back to finish his arc. And that's important. Again, I've said it a million times. They always do this. They don't leave threads hanging and dangling loosely. They will always finish off these character arcs. And that's important for Beth's arc. Okay, so Crane shows up from Padre, and of course he wants Padre back. He takes both Madison and Troy hostage. He takes them in a truck to, where were they going? I think, he wanted Troy to show him where the horde was going, the Walker horde, so that he could stop it. But before they could get wherever they were going, both Daniel and Luciana show up and free Madison and Troy, and they're handcuffed together at this point. Of course, Daniel is dead set on killing Troy as well because of what happened to Charlie, and Troy did actually have a huge hand in killing his biological daughter, Ophelia, several seasons back. But Madison convinces them not to kill him right now because of the horde, and she wants to figure out where it's going so that they can save Padre. She even tells them to keep him cuffed to her so that he can't run away. So they kind of all go their separate ways. Lucy and Daniel go to do something else, but Madison is taking Troy with her, and they end up in the swamp once again. And Madison wants to turn back because there's a really rickety bridge, and underneath it in the swamp, the walkers are actually sinking as though it's quicksand or something. But they're not given much of a choice because Crane finds them, shows up, and starts chasing them and shooting at them and all of that. They get on the bridge to cross it, and Crane ends up cutting it so that they fall into the swamp, exactly what they didn't want to happen. So the biggest thing here is that it's bridge symbolism, and we often see the bridge kind of, not directly, but in conjunction with someone who either dies and is resurrected or disappears and comes back. So we actually do see this in a big way in Beth's arc. She's not on the bridge, but remember that Daryl and Carol were on the bridge and drove the van off of it, right? And it's something that, that's the thing that's a little bit unrealistic in terms of the way the van fell. And people were saying, it wasn't terribly realistic that they could do that and walk away from it. I mean, Carol was hurt, but not as hurt as you would think she would be. But I don't think that's the point. The writers weren't trying to be realistic or non-realistic there. It's just the symbolism of the thing. And of course, right after that is when Beth is shot and disappears. In this case, they did something similar, but it was much smaller, of course. Madison and Troy went into the water, and it seemed like they both died. I'll get into the details in just a second. But then we see them waking up on the bank. So it's almost like symbolically they died, but came back to life. The other thing is that there's a lot of biblical symbolism here. So they go into the water. Madison makes noise to call the walkers to them, and they end up taking out Crane, so he's dead. I mean, he's a little bit like Morales in that they brought him back to tie up his character arc, but really they just kind of brought him back to kill him. He wasn't a terribly important character. He was just like a minor plot twist here at the end. But they did also use him for the symbolism, right? So they're in the water, and the suction, whatever it is, the quicksand is pulling them under. And Troy tells her that he lied about where the Walker horde was, and he tells her where it really is. And, she's not sure if she believes him. But in the end, she says it's better if people like them die, and then Padre will have a better chance of living on. And then they both go under the water, and it feels like they both died. So the reason there's so much biblical symbolism there is because it's baptismal symbolism. In the Christian religion, baptism is meant to be a type of resurrection because you go under the water and it's supposed to be sort of a forgiveness of sins. And when you come up, you're a new person and you've been reborn of water, right? And it is supposed to be sort of a mirror to Christ's resurrection. I mean, that is what is taught in the Christian religion. So in this case, they went under the water, and then at some point they come back up, and we don't really see exactly how it happens, but Madison wakes up on the bank, and she is told that Troy is actually the one who saved her. He got a hold of a root or a branch and managed to pull himself out, and because he was cuffed to her, of course, he saved her too and pulled her out. But when she's there, or when she wakes up, a bunch of other people like Strand are there standing around to help her, and they've cut her loose from Troy. So then Troy tells her that he actually lied about one thing that he said about his wife, and that was that she never stopped believing what Alicia believed. So basically, he told her in the earlier story that maybe his wife became really bitter about it because by helping someone, it got her killed. But he says actually that wasn't true. He saw it in her eyes when she died that she did still believe that what she did was right, even though it got her killed. And basically, Troy is saying that he wants a second chance. Now, Madison is obviously very reluctant to do this, but she tells him that if he wants that, he has to tell them where the herd is. So he does, and we see the rest of his guys, including his right-hand man is named Russell, leading the herd. And what they're going to do is they're going to take it to the water. They're hoping they kind of have figured out the way the tides go, and so they're hoping that the walkers will be taken by the tide out to the island, out to Padre, and will be able to take it over that way. I did notice this one walker at the front of the horde that's wearing red and black flannel. I'm not going to go into it too much, especially because I don't even remember the details, but we have seen that before. I remember Daryl wearing a red and black flannel sleeve when they were, what season was that? When they went to take the guns from Oceanside. So remember Tara, after she left Oceanside, wasn't supposed to tell anyone where it was, but they went back to get the guns so that they could find Negan, and Daryl was missing one sleeve to his coat. It was like it had been stitched together, and he had a red and black flannel sleeve. And anyway, so we've seen that a few times, and it's interesting that both times it was near the ocean. So again, maybe I'll try to do a post on that later on. I need to look back through my notes from a long time ago and remember what all the details of that were, but it is something that we've seen before. So the MRAP shows up and shoots a big chunk of the walkers, but they're not going to be able to get all of them, so they use some trucks, Odessa is there, and lead them all away. So they basically disperse the herd. I did notice at this point, I probably should have noticed it once before, but that Tracy is wearing cowboy boots, and I think she has been this entire time. So in that sense, there's a little bit of a parallel to Beth, just in the cowboy boots. And like I said before, the fact that she's so spunky, she's a lot like Judith, which of course is also a parallel to Beth. So it seems as though maybe they will give Troy a chance to change and give him a second chance, especially as he's helped them with the walkers. He just wants a safe place to raise his child, right? But everybody's arguing as to whether Troy ought to be given a second chance. Strand is definitely arguing for it because he himself has done some not so good things, and he believes that Troy should be given a second chance, but pretty much everyone else doesn't really trust him. So Madison goes to talk to him, and it seems again like she's going to give him a second chance, but then she ends up stabbing him in the stomach with Alicia's desiccated arm, and she just says that she doesn't believe that he's changed. And this is one of those things that obviously it's very dark. She kills him instead of giving him the second chance, which is what Alicia probably would have advocated. But it's very polarizing because on the one hand, for Madison, for her soul, she really should have given him the second chance, and this was a very, very dark thing for her to do. But on the other hand, I do kind of agree with her. I don't think that Troy was trustworthy. Even at the end when he was telling her all these things about how he had changed and everything would be okay, he put his hand on her shoulder, and it felt very, I don't know, aggressive or controlling. And I was going, oh yeah, as soon as he gets someplace safe where he feels like he has the upper hand, he's going to be back to his old ways. So I think it was a little bit of both, in my opinion, but it was still a very dark and not necessarily moral thing that she did. Of course, Tracy flips out, of course she would. I mean, this poor kid has been through so much, and she runs away. But before that happens, Troy tells Madison that Tracy is not actually his child. And she said, what are you talking about? You said your wife was pregnant. And he said, yeah, but she died before the baby was born. And she says, okay, well then if your wife wasn't her mother, who is? And he says, Alicia. So that way freaks Madison out, as you might imagine, and Tracy, and that's why she runs, because it seems like this might be Madison's grandchild. And that is pretty much the end of the episode. So there wasn't quite as much in that first episode. There was Troy's head wound. There was the little mini death and resurrection of him and Madison going into the swamp and then surviving. And I did kind of wonder if this was Alicia's child, what kind of implications that would have for Beth. We don't really believe that she would have a biological child. And I was kind of going, well, with her, it might just be kind of what Lou was doing in the Daryl Dixon series, the one that was running the school. Like, she could have a child, but it wouldn't be hers biologically. Like, somebody that, she had kind of adopted and was taking care of, much like Daryl does with Judith and RJ. But I just kind of wondered. I was like, okay, that's an interesting twist. I wonder what that's about. But let's just say things get a little reversed by the end of the final episode. So the final episode does have a lot more in it than the first one did, or than episode 11 did. So yeah, let's just dive right into that one. The road ahead. We start out with a montage of Nick and Alicia. They're just flashbacks that Madison is having as she's looking for Tracy. Tracy hides in a log. She just ran away from everyone and hides there. And her ankle is hurt, which is also a Beth parallel. But when she comes out, first she sees Daniel and Sherry and Dwight and Lucy all talking, and they all kind of want to leave. I mean, Sherry and Dwight have Russell, who is Troy's right-hand guy, and want to use him as leverage, but Daniel just wants to leave. He's just going, this is getting to be a mess. Let's just get out of here. Which honestly, I'm surprised more of them don't do that more often. I mean, at this point, if you have 10 different factions all wanting Padre, at that point, I wouldn't want it anymore, because you're always going to be having to defend it. Like, I'd be like, let's go find a place that nobody wants, and then we can live more peacefully there, Anyway, but it's just part of the world. Anytime you set up something that is protected, then people are going to want it. Anyway, so eventually Tracy comes out of the log and is attacked by walkers and almost dies, but Madison saves her. Lucy's getting a car ready because Daniel told her to do that, but Madison shows up and wants Luciana to take her to Fort Worth to look for Alicia. And of course, Madison is being much more sympathetic toward Tracy now because she thinks she is her granddaughter. But before she can go, Strand and Daniel show up, and Madison shoots the gun in the air because she doesn't want Strand taking Tracy to Padre. She wants to take her with her to find Alicia, and that just causes walkers to come, and they all have to go hide inside the buildings. Meanwhile, Strand radios Franck to ask for help because they're surrounded by walkers, but Franck says they're not going to be able to do that because a barge full of walkers has arrived just off the coast of Padre, and it's more of Troy's guys. It's Russell, and they let the walkers out. They just let the side of the barge down, and now they're going to have a lot of walkers on the island, besieging Padre. Well, Padre actually has pretty decent walls, and so they just get inside the walls and shut the gates. And they say that those walls will hold. I mean, they're not really in that much danger of the walkers overrunning them, knocking down the walls or anything. But they're also kind of trapped and can't really get out to get supplies or anything, so they're going to have to figure out what to do. Of course, Sherry and Dwight made it back to the island, so they have Russell, Troy's guy, and Russell wants Tracy because, Troy was his best friend and he had promised Troy to take care of Tracy, and so he tells Madison that Troy didn't actually kill Alicia, and this is one of the first really big parallels that's going to inform Beth's arc. He says that Troy stabbed Alicia and she was hurt pretty bad and left for dead, but Troy did not wait around to see her die because she stabbed him too and hurt him pretty bad. She didn't, Madison says, yeah, but he said she turned. And he said, no, I told him that she turned, but he didn't actually see it. So Russell just told Troy what he wanted to hear, basically, because he was hurt and he was angry and it was just like a really dark time, right? So that's pretty huge because it parallels exactly what we think happened during those missing 17 days. That she was left for dead, and specifically that Team Family thinks she turned, but she didn't. We don't know exactly how that went down in the missing 17 days with Beth, because obviously the situation was a little bit different, but it may come back to Sasha in some way. And, you know, what people have said about, did she know something? Did she tell them Beth had turned? Did she, I know that there's been theories that maybe if Sasha saw what she thought was Beth as a walker, she might have actually tried to shoot her, and not to murder Beth or anything, but because she thought she was a walker and trying to put her down. And either it didn't work. I mean, she could have seen a walker that she thought was Beth and shot her, but it actually wasn't. It was just some other blonde walker, you know. Or it could be that it didn't really work and she wasn't able to shoot her, and so she told everybody that she did, and that Beth turned and she put her down. I mean, with the thing about Daryl being angry with her at Tyrese's funeral and turning his back on her, I can see that it might be that she told Daryl that she shot Beth and, I don't know, either buried her on her own or wasn't able to retrieve her, and Daryl was just bitter because he wanted to be able to put Beth to rest and he felt like Sasha took that from him or something like that, you know. Meanwhile, she got to bury Tyrese, and even though it was terribly tragic that he died and she lost her brother, at least she got to bury him, which kind of mirrors what Madison said in the second to last episode to Troy about it must be nice to be able to bury your loved one, right? So it's really, really strong parallels here to what happened to Beth. So then he goes on to say that a couple of days later, Troy wanted a couple of his men to go back and make absolutely sure that Alicia was dead and finish the job. When they went back, they found a mattress with blood on it and the knife he had used to stab her, but no Alicia. So once again, there's another parallel. They went back to look for her days later and she was gone. Same thing. So then Russell, somehow he had some grenades and used them to blow up some of Padre's walls, which of course is going to let the walkers in. So Dwight kind of takes the reins, and I thought it was kind of nice to see him leading. I actually liked that aspect of it. But he told them to use flares to draw as many of the walkers away as they could and kind of thin the herd. And then everybody just needed to get to the dock and try to get to a boat to get off the island. They had this fun little detail where June managed to get John's old guns and some of his ammo, his pistols. And I thought that was fun. It was kind of their way of including John in the very last episode, even though he died some time ago. So I really liked that detail. They push Russell out into the horde, and the walkers chew him. So he dies. And then they open the door and head out. Meanwhile, back at the place where we got Madison, Strand, Daniel, Luciana, Tracy, they're all trapped inside the auto shop because Madison fired off the gun and that brought walkers. Most of them are really, really mad, especially Daniel, at Madison. And he just feels like she's super toxic and everything she does gets people killed, which he's really not entirely wrong about that. And so he's really angry, and he and Lucy just decide they're going to leave together. Strand and the, Alicia's followers who are like her, who dress like her, they decide to go and try to save the people on the island at Padre. And Strand really wants Madison to come with him, but she doesn't want to. She says that she's not in any shape to go into a fight, and if she dies there, she's not going to be able to find Alicia, and she's not going to be able to protect her grandchild. And Strand's really upset with her about that she won't come help him save his family. And once again, I kind of had the same thought that everybody's a little bit right, they have a point, and everybody's a little bit wrong. And it's just a really difficult situation. And The Walking Dead is really good at putting these really polarizing moral situations in place. Because, from a physical standpoint, I think Madison's right, that she is not in any, physical way to sustain a walker fight. Chances are she would die in something like that. And now she does have this little girl to protect. On the other hand, she kind of sold Strand out, and they're best friends, and he has had her back and been trying to help her save her family, and I understand why he would be upset about that. Morally, it wasn't the best decision on her part. So yeah, you can kind of see it both ways, but it's just kind of a difficult scene, and it's also kind of a goodbye scene between her and Strand. They don't think they're ever going to really see one another again, which kind of ends up being true in a way, and they actually talked about this at the very end, after the episode, in the inside the episode part, but I'll get to that at the end. So Strand goes to the island, but Madison is going to get in the car with Tracy and try to go to Fort Worth and see if they can find Alicia. They have a little bit of a heart-to-heart, and Madison tells Tracy about how she once killed her dad because he was an alcoholic and used to beat her mom. That definitely has shades of both Carol and Daryl in it, but it's part of Madison's backstory. We have heard that before. Then Tracy says, "So you get it," and she shoots Madison. I literally gasped. Like, I was not expecting that at all. I was like, oh my gosh. But there was the "you get it" line, which is very similar to Beth's "I get it." And honestly, like, one thing that we've always said about fear is that for some reason, the symbolism is more on the nose in fear, and we're able to kind of figure out what the symbolism means by watching Fear, where it's a little bit more nebulous in The Walking Dead, in the flagship show. So everybody always wondered what exactly Beth meant by "I get it now." And I mean, we have hit on this before in various ways, but I think this kind of proves it, that what Tracy was saying here and what Madison was trying to teach her in error was that mercy gets you killed. And the only way you can survive is to be ruthless and merciless. And so Tracy shoots Madison, and Madison actually starts laughing. And Tracy says, "Why are you laughing?" And she said, "Because you get it now, and you'll be able to survive because you've learned to be ruthless," basically, which is not a good and moral teaching for anybody, much less a child. But it would make sense that that's what Beth was referring to, because she understood that that's the way Dawn operated, and she felt like the only way to save Noah and to keep Dawn from imprisoning more people would be to kill her. But in that moment, thinking like that, which is completely contrary to the way Beth always did things, she was always about goodness and kindness and empathy and faith, that's what got her shot. That was her mistake. And I think when she wakes up and everything, she'll come back from that pretty quickly and realize that that's what happened, and then she'll never want to think that way again. But we just see it here. It's like almost a definition of that line between Madison and Tracy here. So from there, it looks like everything's going wrong. The people on Padre didn't really make it to the dock, and they're surrounded by walkers, and it looks like they're going to die. And Strand is freaking out, and Madison seems like she's dying on the ground beside the car, and Tracy ran away, and it's just kind of like everybody's darkest hour. Lucy and Daniel hear Strand calling on the radio, but Lucy says they're never going to get there in time. They're too far away. So then it fades into the morning, and we don't really know what happens, but it seems like maybe everybody died. Tracy does find Troy as a walker, and she talks to him, and she says she thinks everyone on the island died, but then she ends up shooting him and burying him. And then Strand finds her. He tells her that Madison didn't die beside the car because, and this is something I didn't say, but earlier in the episode, or it might have even been in the first episode, Madison put Alicia's St. Christopher medallion inside a gun clip and put it in her jacket. And when Tracy shot her, it hit that clip, which saved her life. And that's super, super symbolic, right? Because Alicia's medallion, which was supposed to protect people, protected Madison. And by having something sentimental, wanting to keep a memento of her daughter, that also saved her, which is very symbolic, because that's the opposite of being ruthless. That's sentimental. That's having loyalty to somebody, even just to their memory. So Madison didn't die, and she kind of passed out, but it's kind of like having a Kevlar vest on. It still hurts when you get shot like that, but obviously she didn't die. And that too, I mean, that alone is by itself very much a parallel to Beth, because she got shot, but she didn't die. She was lying next to a car. I mean, she was in a car when she got shot, but we have her waking up next to a car when she should have been dead. And she kind of does this. It comes across as a little bit cheesy in Fear the Walking Dead, because Madison's asleep and then just kind of does this and wakes up. And it's like, okay, well, being a little bit overly dramatic. But I honestly think that it's to show they're trying to emphasize somebody waking up. You know what I mean? It's to parallel Beth, and that she probably woke up in the car and didn't know what was going on after she was shot, right? And Strand has this line where he says, "Something stopped the bullet." Now, I don't know if that will be the case with Beth, but that felt very, I don't know, like it could inform what happened to Beth in some way. Something stopped the bullet. Something stopped it from being fatal for her. He also then tells her that Madison realized how wrong she'd been in that moment. Again, like I said, maybe Beth will realize that too, that stabbing Dawn was just not the right thing to do, and the reasoning behind it. Anyway, Madison wanted to restore Tracy's faith in what's worth fighting for. That was something that Strand said. And of course, faith is always a link back to Beth. So Madison then went to Padre. She used some flares to lead the walkers away from the people who were trapped on the shore. And that's everybody. That's Dwight and Sherry and June and all of them, Strand's family. And she actually led them back inside Padre. She opened a whole bunch of oxygen canisters and then blew the place up. So it definitely seemed like she finally died this time. Anyway, Tracy pulls a gun on Strand. She doesn't want to stay with him. She doesn't want to live at Padre. And she takes off and runs away. The next thing we see are some purple flowers, and I'm pretty sure these are the same purple flowers they used when Nick, Madison's son, died. We see, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense right away, but we see Tracy pick these flowers and put them in a vase where Madison is laying. And I couldn't tell at first if they were trying to say she was dead or not. I mean, it definitely looked like she was breathing. So I was going, I don't, if she's supposed to be dead, they're doing a terrible job of showing that she is. But then she wakes up, and as it turned out, Tracy went and found her in the rubble of Padre and dragged her out. And Madison actually did live. Now, I'm not going to say that's the most realistic thing. I mean, not that Madison would live or not live, like that doesn't bother me. It's just that I don't think there's any way this tiny little girl could have dragged her out of a pile of rubble, of rocks. I just don't really see that happening. But, you know, for purposes of the show, the point is that Madison was supposed to live. And then who should show up but Alicia? So, once again, I said from the very beginning that whatever happens with Alicia is going to mirror what happens with Beth, because, number one, the last time we saw Alicia, she had been bitten, and she did cut off her arm, but not in time, so she was dealing with a fever, and she really thought she was going to die. And as I've said many times, that episode, the last one we saw Alicia in, which was last season, had so many Beth parallels. I mean, we were analyzing that episode for days, and now, look, lo and behold, she has survived. So that really gives a lot of credence to the idea that Beth was probably bitten on the arm and that the bite theory is probably correct. But more than that, it just goes to show that all of these parallels with her, that she was, with Troy, that she was apparently, quote unquote, killed, left for dead. They thought she turned, but she really didn't. And then when they went back to check, she was gone. All of those leading to her showing up later and being alive, that's a really strong parallel to Beth. So just like in season 6, I talked about how Glenn had all these parallels to Beth, and he had her dialogue and he had symbolism around him. And I said, if Glenn dies, we're screwed. Team Delusional is screwed because he has all the same symbolism. So if he's dead, then Beth is too, right? But he wasn't dead. All of the same symbolism, and he was alive, which also means that Beth is alive. Same thing here. All of this parallel to her arc and to what we believe happened during the missing 17 days. Alicia had all of that, and she turned out to be alive. So it's the same thing. Honestly, if Alicia had turned out to be dead, I wouldn't have seen that as an end-all, be-all, and meaning that Beth is dead. But the fact that she's alive just proves even more that we're right about that. We have put together what happened during the missing 17 days from clues that the writers have given us, and it is just not a coincidence that they're doing the exact same thing with Alicia, that they're having the same kind of parallels. And once again, this helps to plant the idea in the audience that this could actually happen. So people will be a lot more accepting of Beth when she returns, and that this could actually be a thing that is realistic. The other thing that was kind of fun is that when Alicia showed up, she had Skidmark, the cat. It's Daniel's cat, and I thought that was really funny. She was trying to return him to Daniel. The other thing that was kind of interesting is Madison asks Alicia how she found her, how she heard about her, and Alicia says it was a story she heard. It didn't make any sense, and I didn't know how you could possibly be alive, but I had to be sure. And she said that she heard her name. So once again, we've said this so many times that maybe someone will hear Beth's name, or maybe it'll be the opposite. She'll hear Daryl's name, and that's kind of how they're going to come back together. And we've always thought that the radio would play a part in it, and I think we're going to be right about that. So they leave together. Oh, they do also find out that Tracy is actually not Alicia's child, so it kind of made that aspect of it null and void. And they said that the reason that Troy said that is because he wanted his daughter to live, and he knew Madison would fight to keep her alive if she thought that Tracy was her granddaughter. So it does show it's a little bit of a redemption arc for Troy in that at least he loved his daughter enough to do whatever he needed to protect her. And I still think that he would have gone back to being a villain if he had lived, but at least he loved his daughter that much, and that's saying something, that he was a father who was willing to protect his child. So Madison and Alicia and Tracy leave together, and they try to find, where everybody else has gone, while they're on a bridge looking out over an overpass. Madison says, or I think Alicia said it first, I would have come looking for you if I knew you were alive. And Madison said, I would have looked for you too. I never would have stopped. So again, it just feels like something that Beth and Daryl will say to each other at some point. Alicia also tells her that she was avoiding Troy because she knew that if he knew she was alive, he would try to kill her again. And she could see that the legend of her and that she, had been helping people was inspiring other people. And, being a martyr was actually helping more than her actually being there. So she went to a different place and started using a different name. That is something we've actually theorized about a lot, is that could Beth be using a different name? And remember that I've said several times that Troy in this analogy, if you're comparing it to, Beth and Daryl's arc, Troy is kind of symbolic of the CRM. So you can see it being the same way, that Beth is going to tangle with the CRM somehow. She's going to get away from them. And I actually hadn't thought of this before, but maybe it's not an actual escape from them since they don't let anyone leave alive. Maybe it's a matter of they think she's dead, and that's the only reason she gets away from them, kind of like Alicia did with Troy. But then she changes her name because she knows the CRM is looking for her, and that could be why it takes so long for anybody to find her or realize she's out there. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but I think all of these are real possibilities. They're being put into this episode purposefully, and I think it's because they're going to mirror other things. So then we see kind of the whole gang, and I will say that I was a little surprised. I assumed that they would all stay together and maybe all head toward Alexandria or something, and they didn't. They all went their kind of separate ways. Dwight and Sherry do decide to go back to the sanctuary and try to make it a home and take people there to help them. Daniel sees Skidmark, but they kind of just release the cat, and he picks it up and hugs it. I thought that was super cute. June is going back to the cabin she was in with John, and Odessa is going with her and wants to learn medicine. And then Strand, of course, is leaving with his family, but he does look off and see Madison and Alicia and Tracy in a field. And so at least he knows that they're alive and they're okay, and then he can kind of go on his way and be all right and focus on his family. So all I will say about all of that is that clearly the writers have plans for these characters. I mean, they wouldn't be sending them to such specific places if they didn't have, something in mind. So I think we will see them in other installments of the series and in other spin-offs and things like that, and that'll be fun. I am glad that most of them survived and that we'll get the chance to see them again. And then Madison and Alicia decided to go back to LA, which I actually thought was a little bit random. I don't think they'll end up staying there very long. It just doesn't seem... It would be like Rick deciding to go back to Atlanta and just stay there and try to help people. It's like, the cities are pretty overrun with walkers. I don't think that they're going to be able to do much good in LA. Maybe in the suburbs around it or something. But overall, I think it was mostly symbolic because they started out in LA and they wanted to go back to where they started, and they have Nick's ashes. And the final line as they're pulling off in the car is, "Let's go home." And of course, as we always say, home is where your family is. So not until Madison reunited with her daughter, who was alive, and this was absolutely a resurrection because she thought her dead, and Alicia should have died about 7 different times, and she is still alive, and she's doing good in the world, much like we think Beth will. She's helping people, she's spreading hope and spreading faith and good works and all of that. But anyway, not until they reunited as a family, and I think that's important why they have Nick's ashes and why they brought that into it, is because Nick needed to be with them because he started with them, so he needs to end with them even if it's just his ashes. And then that's when they can finally go home, is when they're finally with their family again, because home in the show is always symbolic of family, not of a place, but of the people you are with. So yeah, it just kind of reinforced everything that we've been saying for a long time. It was a fun end to the series. I talked about the inside the episode. So first of all, at the end, they had all the actors saying thank you to the fans, which is always sweet when they do that. It's always kind of nostalgic because it's the end of the show, but I really liked that. But in the inside the episode, The showrunner said something that I kind of had to chuckle at. He says, talking about Alicia and Madison, he says, it felt like their stories would never really be complete unless these two characters were allowed to come together one more time. That definitely applies to Beth and Daryl. Their stories are not going to be complete unless we can find some closure on this arc, and we have definitely not found it yet. So their stories are not going to be complete until they're allowed to come back together again. That's going to be true of Beth and Daryl, just like it was of Madison and Alicia. But the thing that made me laugh is he said, we talked about a lot of ways to do it, to, do this reunion, but ultimately we thought it should feel like a karmic reward for Madison finally making the right decision. And I had to laugh at that because he makes it, they always do this. They make it sound like it was just something they organically came up with and they had to figure out some way to do this. And I absolutely think that's a lie. I mean, they do give, of course, the showrunner a lot of leeway to tell the story the way he wants, but it's always it has to be in line with what Gimple wants, right? With the direction that Gimple and King have given him. And we have said for so long that Daryl needs to be in a place where he's worthy of Beth to show up. And it's going to be a karmic thing. It's going to be him having faith and making the right decision. So the fact that they did that with Madison too. I mean, and he's like, oh, well, we thought about doing it other ways. No, you didn't. It was always planned this way. And because it parallels Daryl so well. I just really like that. And it just goes to show that the things we have been discussing for years are true. We're seeing them in this episode in, Fear to mirror what's going to happen with Beth and Daryl, hopefully very soon. And I also don't think that it's a coincidence that they're ending it on this story. Because as the spin-offs kick off, as we've said many times, they're going to end Fear the Walking Dead and push everyone back into probably a single narrative eventually, and that will be part of the CRM war. But it's not a coincidence that as this particular spin-off is ending, we're seeing resurrections, we're seeing reunions, we're seeing people find family and quote-unquote go home together. So even though it's not, we didn't actually see Beth and everybody would have hoped for that. I don't know. I obviously would love it if she showed up in any spinoff anytime. I think the next one we're going to see is the Rick and Michonne spinoff. And if she's there, fantastic. I would love that. But overall, I just feel like they might keep that for Daryl's spinoff because that's where it's going to be the most relevant. So I don't know. I kind of didn't feel it, even before I watched these episodes, like it was going to happen. It just didn't feel like it to me, but I would have been happy to be wrong, of course. But I mean, even the fact that it didn't is okay because it's, everything that we did see there is a foreshadow of what's going to happen with Beth. And they're trying to tell us that. They're trying to say, okay, this is something that can happen. I mean, once again, it's a big deal that Alicia survived that bite. I mean, that's huge. That's something we have not seen before anywhere in the universe. And they're planting those seeds that this actually can happen. It happened with Alicia, and if people can accept that, they will accept it happening with Beth. So the writers are being very strategic about the way that they're showing this and the things that they're preparing us to see in, later installments of the show. So yeah, okay, I think that's what I have to say about these episodes. I did really, really enjoy them, and I thought it was a really fitting end to Fear the Walking Dead. It's been going 8 seasons, which blows my mind that it's been that long, but even though it was never quite as good as the flagship show, it doesn't have Daryl in it, it doesn't have Rick in it, so of course we're not going to like it quite as much. It was still, they did some good storytelling, and I do like these characters a lot, so I'm hoping we'll get to see them again somewhere in the Walking Dead universe. Okay, so that's it, I guess, for Fear the Walking Dead. A little bit of housekeeping. Coming up this week, I will finish up any asks that I have in my inbox. I'll do some more video asks. I will probably do those through Friday, so if you want to submit anything, do it before then. After that, I'm going to be on hiatus until January. I've got some other projects to do, as I've talked about before. I will post some Christmas edits in December, but that's all I will be posting. And yeah, beyond that, I will be back in the new year. So let me know what you guys thought of the episode, and then I will be here a little bit more later this week. Okay? Bye!